Hey now, it's Brace for Impact, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm going solo on that ass, but it's still the same. We're talking TNA wrestling, and kind of a weird week for TNA, and we'll get into all that here in a minute. Kind of a weird and somber at times. There's also some excitement around the company, so we'll get into all that. But I do want to thank everybody that was a part of Bound for Glory weekend right here on the Mike and JD Show Patreon, as well as Mike and JD Show YouTube. I did 3 original Brace for Impact episodes that were across both platforms. And I also did a full preview on the Mike and JD Show. So on this channel, we did 4 podcasts in the span of a 4-day period covering TNA. I don't think you get that anywhere else. I at least on a channel that covers a wide range of topics. I don't think any other TNA channel did that. I could be mistaken. You guys could probably correct me on that. So I do want to thank you guys. The only reason I do it is because you guys consume the content, and it is typically like the TNA content is our most consumed content on a regular basis. Like, I know that you guys are going to show up and support whenever I make those clips and whenever I get up. Like this morning, I had a tough night last night. So kids are waking me up, man. And I set my alarm for 5 a.m., made my coffee, and now I'm here at 6 a.m. Hawaii Standard Time. And I do it because I know that you guys are going to, I see Billy in the chat. I know the Patreon community that we have built here is going to support the content. And then I know once I clip it, for those that like to just consume, portions of it on YouTube, I know they're going to support the content, and that's important to me. So thanks to everybody for Bound for Glory weekend. I did, not only did I do the preview show, I did the Brace for Impact that was exclusive to the Patreon. It didn't go anywhere else. I only did audio for it. I didn't do any video whatsoever. I didn't clip it, didn't do anything. That was like a legit Patreon only. So that was probably, and that's where I recapped. The Impact episode from last week, and then not only that, I provided some more of my predictions for Bound for Glory, and then I did live on YouTube right after Bound for Glory was over last Saturday night. It was that was our biggest episode. Our biggest live episode of Brace for Impact ever. We actually broke every record that we had for not only live viewership at a single point, but the actual numbers of the episode. Not the best I've ever done for Brace for Impact episode. I've actually done better, but it was the best for a live like pay-per-view after show. So that was the best that I had done on those. And so when a couple years ago, not like 2023 and early 2023, we thought maybe the Brace for Impact was dead. JD didn't want to do the show anymore. We were pivoting to do more your standard content that you get from everybody else, where we're covering a lot of AEW, and we're covering the news, covering all that stuff. But I wasn't willing to give up on it. And I talked to Garrett, and I talked to JD, and I said, hey, look, I'll still do the Mike and JD show, but I think I'm gonna get up. And at the time, I was like, I'm still gonna do all the pay-per-views and all the Impact Plus specials at the time. I'm still gonna do all that stuff because I'm not ready to give up on this yet. Because I was like, I still think I have an audience that'll support the TNA content, and I was right. So I've been doing this show solo for a long time now, and for me to be able to do the best numbers that Brace for Impact has ever done for like a live after show pay-per-view is pretty cool, man. So I'm like, literally, I got no help. I do this shit all my own. But I want to thank Io, who's in the chat. Good morning, sir. I want to thank Io for hopping in, and I want to thank Nanzo, and of course Ibu of Russell Purist for jumping on that live episode. You guys are all very helpful to me, and then thanks to everybody that was in the chat that night. So I appreciate all that too. Like, your guys' chats really do help the show move along, and I greatly appreciate it. So just thank you guys for everything, and thank you guys for all the financial support, because if I didn't have Patreon subscribers, I wouldn't be able to do this anymore because the software costs money. You know, TNA Plus costs money. I pay for it. TNA Plus costs money. The pay-per-views cost money. All that stuff costs money. So and I use the Patreon. I use the Patreon dough, and then of course the ad revenue that we get from YouTube, which is not great. but I use all that, and that's how I pay for everything. And so it's kind of like a break even at this point. And so as long as I'm breaking even, we're good, because this is very much just a hobby for me. I really enjoy it. I was on the flagship Patreon of Voices of Wrestling Network, and they called me they introduced me as a TNA expert. And I had to correct him because Garrett Kidney is also a member of the network. I was like, Garrett's the TNA expert. Okay. I really came into this thing, and I didn't even start podcasting about TNA until 2021. So but I had been doing articles called Brace for Impact for a year before then. And then before that, I had my old Combat Republic website. I had that for like a year, where I was doing a lot of TNA articles and TNA reviews, making a name for myself. And it was really because I saw that the promotion was not getting any attention, and all the major media outlets had essentially given up on covering it, as far as from a standpoint of the weekly show and the pay-per-views and what's actually happening on the show. They were covering the news surrounding the company. So anytime there was like chaos or anything like that, they would cover that. But what they wouldn't cover was like what's happening in the ring, what's happening on the TV show. And I was like, and so I started doing some research, and I saw that there was only a couple of YouTube channels out there. It was BQ, and it was I think Jeff and Lucha had already started doing their stuff, and then I think there was the other one with the guys from Chicago. I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but they have like 6 people on the show, and there was Andrew Sinclair was doing like a weekly column on Voices of Wrestling, but you weren't really getting a lot. So I was like, I think I could really do something here and carve a niche for myself with the show that I'm currently watching that I happen to enjoy. And then so that's really when it started. It wasn't like I'm this TNA expert from day one. I did watch the very first episode live, like the very first pay-per-view. I watched it live, and I watched a lot of those early Asylum years. And then I was like in and out of TNA for a long time. So I'd go in and I'd be hardcore TNA, especially in 05, 06, 07. And then I would go back out, and then I come back in, and then I go back out. But I've been pretty steady since like 2018, where I've maybe missed 1 or 2 episodes since 2018. And so, again, thanks everybody for being a part of the show. I greatly appreciate it. And good morning, Billy, from Philly. What's up? Who's ready for Crown Jewel? That is on this morning, right? Is that on right now, Io? I am not sure. I know that it's on today at some point, and I will try to watch some of it and provide probably a reaction show on Monday. I'll be honest though, when I do the WWE stuff, nobody really likes it. So I have noticed that, at least on the Patreon, because I like to do that stuff for the Patreon. And when I do it for the Patreon, the feedback that I have gotten with the lack of viewership and some of the comments is that nobody's interested in WWE talk from this Patreon. I'm like, oh, okay. But if I put it on the YouTube, like the algorithm will pick it up, because WWE content, especially, does typically, like, that's what the YouTube algorithm is going to pick up more. You put that hashtag WWE, there's some WWE faces on there, and a catchy headline, and it'll actually do pretty good. But my Patreon, nah, they don't really care. The Patreon only consumes classic content. Like anytime we do like an AEW pay-per-view, the AEW stuff does pretty well. TNA stuff does the best by far. And that's about it. So it's like, so I don't know if I'm going to do a Crown Jewel reaction show. I might, just because it'll do well on YouTube, but Patreon doesn't really care about it. Patreon likes Brace for Impact, the Mike and JD show, and Overtime. That's all the Patreon. But when I'm like getting up early on a Monday morning and doing a reaction show for a WWE pay-per-view, like, nobody cares. And in fact, I've gotten messages like, I'm not listening to that. So I was like, okay, fair enough. Like I appreciate the transparency and the honesty quite a bit. So but yeah, let's go ahead and get into our top story. And it is a somber one. Chris Bay, as you guys already know, broke his neck during the Sunday TNA Impact tapings in Detroit, the night after Bound for Glory. He was in a match with the Hardys, and it was I believe it was probably the main event of that week's episode. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just kind of like looking at the way the TV tapings were set up. They still had one more match. It was going to be Rhino and Cardona in a street fight, but TNA opted not to have that match, and instead they had the Joe Hendry, Jeff Hardy concert, and just to kind of, cheer up the fans a little bit. They just saw something traumatic, and so I thought that was cool. I thought that was a good way to handle that instead of like just doing another match. You don't want to send the crowd home on that note, so they just brought out Jeff and Joe, and then they just sang songs to the crowd and cheered them back up. And then, of course, they did a spot with AJ Francis and sent everybody home happy. I thought that was a unique way to handle that situation. But I thought that was a cool way to do that. But Dave Meltzer had it in his Observer newsletter. He had some details on it. Although details are pretty sparse. There's not much. Like, TNA is not really talking about his condition. They're saying he's in good spirits and he's doing better, and he started the rehab process there in Detroit. He's surrounded by family, and he's surrounded by friends. Ace Austin had at the point of this publication, which came out yesterday, Austin had not left his side, which I think is really cool and just speaks to the type of person that Ace Austin is. And so, yeah, Bay and Ace Austin were wrestling the new TNA Tag Champs, the Hardys. Bay came off the top rope into a twist of fate, but there was a timing issue, and he appeared to be seriously hurt. He spent several minutes in the ring before being put in a neck brace and taken out on a stretcher. So that is the details as to what happened there. I did hear from somebody that was there that it was a twist of fate that was supposed to go into a neck breaker. So twist of fate into a neck breaker, and the neck breaker, for whatever reason, looked like pretty normal, but it hurt him. And then Jeff Hardy, while Bay was down, did a leg drop from the ropes. And that is what I had heard. So like, I guess they just didn't know that he was seriously injured. Jeff Hardy didn't like hit him hard with the leg drop, probably barely touched him, but still, that's what I had heard. From some folks that were there. And so let's see. Billy says, let's see. Meltzer report is essentially accurate. Yeah, he's missing a little bit of the details, I think. And then the stunner neck breaker, the Hardys do, I believe. Yeah. So it's where Jeff will do the stunner, and then the guy will bounce up and they will go into the neck breaker. So Jeff hits the stunner, like twist of fate stunner, essentially, because like Matt Hardy does twist of fate, it's into a diamond cutter, right? Where he's doing the front face lock, turning around, and hits a diamond cutter. But what Jeff does is he does the front face lock, turns around, hits it into a stunner, and then they bounce backwards, and then it goes into a neck breaker from Matt Hardy. That is something they've done 1,000 times. Yeah, Billy says it's called the plot twist. That's something they've done 1,000 times. It didn't really look out of the ordinary, but that's what. So when you've taken a lot of damage on your neck, it doesn't really take much. When your neck is ready to go, it's gonna go. There's been no video evidence of it. I don't think we'll probably ever see it unless somebody that was there was filming and puts it out. But we have not seen it. We definitely won't be seeing the match. We definitely won't be seeing the match. But yeah, it was something that was done 1,000 times, and that's kind of what happens with the neck. And if you guys, and this is like a gruesome comparison, but Mitsuharu Misawa from Japan, kind of a similar thing where his neck was just compounded by damage from years and years and years of falling on his head, right? Much more extreme than what Bey does, to be honest with you. And he took a routine move and he just didn't get up, and he actually ended up dying in the ring. A very sad thing. It was when he was in Pro Wrestling Noah. But I think it's I don't think it was just one move that did it. I think it was a lot of things leading up to it, and that's that it sucks, man. Chris Bey is he's only 28 years old. He's been in this company since I believe 2019. He was a hot prospect when he came into the company. I was excited that he had signed here. I remember pretty vividly. I wish I had all my old articles, because I even think I wrote an article about it, or at least I featured him in my column whenever he signed. Because if you guys remember, Cody Rhodes was actively trying to sign him to AEW. AEW, had gotten announced, like we heard rumors about it, and then Cody was going around the indies. And honestly, AEW at the time really did some damage to Impact Wrestling. They signed up a lot of talent from Impact Wrestling. So anybody that was about to come due with their contract or just did not have a contract that had some talent and some TV experience, AEW was signing them up. And Chris Bey had been doing dark matches for a lot of different companies, including AEW. And he had been featured on, I believe, 205 Live with WWE. And so Cody Rhodes had put it out there that he was wanting to sign Chris Bey. Chris Bey, a young guy at the time, early 20s. And Cody Rhodes had put it out that he tweeted about it. He even said it was like some cryptic tweet, dashing Chris Bey or something like that. And Chris Bey quote tweeted him, said, "You're too late, brother." So Impact had already signed him at that point. He had come in to do a dark match and they had signed him. And then they brought him in, and he's been a great talent for them. We've all kind of been waiting for him to break through the glass ceiling. He had won the X Division title before. He had a really good run as the X Division champion. He had also had a main event on an Impact Plus special back in the day with Rich Swann that was actually very good. That was Rich Swann won. That was during the pandemic, and but Rich Swann was the champion. He had actually had a main event match with Rich before Omega had come in and done their thing, and so that was really cool. And so we were all thinking hey, they, Ace Austin and Chris Bey at different times had headlined Impact Plus specials. So we were thinking these guys are primed and ready to get into that next level, to get into that main event scene. And it never really happened. It just never really happened. And, every time you bring in a fired WWE star that's 40 years old, it typically pushes down the younger stars that you're hoping to get through to break that glass ceiling. And so I think Bey has fallen victim to that a little bit. I think Billy has a great point. It says, I think Bey's New Japan tours and Bullet Club membership raised his profile. Yeah, he was a member of Bullet Club. He did his New Japan tours. He was out there with Jay White. Unfortunately, whenever Ace and Bey joined Bullet Club was kind of on its ass, and it was Jay White was the leader. This was coming out of the pandemic, and the New Japan just had not been booking Bullet Club very well, but it was kind of cool that they added them and they brought him back. But TNA didn't really do much with them until I think Ace Austin went and did the super, not the Super J Cup, the junior heavyweight tournament. Best of the Super Juniors, I think is what they call it. It's kind of like the junior heavyweight G1. He did that. He looked really good. And then later that year, Austin and Bey did the junior tag league. And then when they come back, they're primed and ready for a spot. And they really focus on being a tag team. And they have been a great tag team the last year or so in TNA. They've won the tag team titles a couple of times, have had great matches, obviously with the Rascals and the System. And I believe they even did a match with the Grizzled Young Vets, who are ghosts on AEW, by the way. They signed with AEW. They've been absolutely ghosts since then. But they've been a great tag team, and then they finally got a pay-per-view main event. They're in there with the Hardys, and obviously being in there with the Hardys is helpful. But they got a pay-per-view main event, the biggest pay-per-view of the year, a featured spot that helped Drew. Like, that match Drew now was the Hardys. It was definitely the Hardys, but the match was a big draw, and they were a part of that. Now, the quality of the match is subjective. I think at times it was a good match, but at times it was awful. So, but I thought Ace and Base specifically looked great in it, and then of course they did have that big spot where Brian Myers hit the execution, or whatever they're calling it, where Bay was dangling from the hook that was holding the belts. He's dangling from the ring, or above the ring, dangling from the ceiling, and then Brian Myers hits him with the spear, and he comes crashing down. And then the next night he breaks his neck. I'm not saying that completely played a factor, but I think one could argue that probably played a factor in that. So that is tough. So, but I really like Chris Bay. It's come out. He's had a ton of support. He's had a ton of financial support. I think as of yesterday, he was up over 80,000. And then a lot of the wrestling community. So let me get this out of the way. So I've been in some different chats, like on Discord, and I've seen the narrative kind of get spewed online. And I was planning on coming here and ending that narrative, but thankfully Matt Hardy was on his podcast and he ended it. But there were a lot of people out there, including like Paul London, who should know better. There are a lot of people out there assuming that TNA was not providing financial support for all the medical bills, and because he's got a GoFundMe out. And I was like, no, I guarantee they're paying the medical bills. They could be sued. They're paying the medical bills. If they weren't paying the medical bills, I think a lot of the roster would just walk out of the freaking company, right? They're paying those medical bills, okay, and they're paying him his contract. That was never in doubt for me, but it was in doubt from other people who I guess just don't understand how this stuff works, right? They just don't. So there's like some conspiracy theorists out there assuming that because there's a GoFundMe out for Chris Bay, that TNA was not providing financial support, that they were not covering the medical expenses, and that they were not going to pay him his contract. It's like, no, when the talent gets injured on your watch, you cover that, right? This is not the 70s and the 80s. Like you cover those bills, right? And TNA is covering the bills. Matt Hardy talked about on his podcast saying TNA is covering all medical expenses. I'm going to go further. TNA is not only covering all medical expenses, they're going to continue to pay him his contract. For how long? I don't know, but they're going to continue to pay him his contract. That's the right thing to do. Why? So then everyone's like, well, why is he doing a GoFundMe? It's like, okay, you guys are fucking weird, but let's get into it. Chris Bay is not like a top guy in TNA. He just had his first main event in forever, right? And it was a three-way main event, and he's in a big spot. But he is not getting paid the same amount of money as like Moose or Nick Nemeth or any of those guys. He's not on like this big time contract. So a lot of the guys that are on the undercard, mid-card, and below, they like TNA is their main source of income, but they're not getting paid like high six-figure salaries, okay? Because TNA doesn't work enough dates to be able to do that for everybody. They do it for the tippy top stars where they're probably well into the six figures, but they're not doing it for the lower card stars and the younger stars. So those guys got to supplement their income on the independents. Well, what happens now, Chris Bay gets hurt. He can't go work the independents anymore. So therein lies so now he's going to be missing some income. And he's got bills to pay, right? So TNA probably pays him pretty decent based off of the dates that he works. Like if you take a look at his per date deal, they probably pay him pretty decent compared to what he gets paid on his indie rate. right? It's probably above that. So they probably pay him pretty well. TNA is not getting this huge rights fee. Like it's not like AEW getting 170 million a year for all their like these guys are not driving a ton of revenue. Okay. It's not an apples to apples comparison. It's like, oh well, WWE covers that. Well, look, WWE, they're getting like they have like $1 billion worth of television deals, right? They can just write a single check and then this guy would be great forever. But that's not TNA. And everybody's like, well, Len Asper has all this money. It's like, I think you need to reevaluate your thinking on how much money Len Asper actually has. He has access to a lot of money through, being able to raise funds through, investors and things like that. And all these like debt consumption companies and whatnot, to be able to buy certain things. But he doesn't like Len Asper doesn't have like $1 billion in his back pocket. Right. It's like, it's different stocks and all this other stuff. And like Anthem essentially is like a debt consumption company. They buy distressed assets and they take out loans and then they keep taking out loans and they raise funds. And TNA happens to be the top revenue driver for the company. But it's not driving a ton of revenue to where they're able to just, it's like dish out millions of dollars a year to like a single person. This is not what they're doing. Right. And so, but that is that wasn't even like a real controversy, but I did see some people online saying that. And I was just like, you guys are not smart. You're just very, very not smart. So I wanted to put a pin in that. And I'm glad that Matt Hardy did, like the type of leader that he is. I'm glad that they did that. But the GoFundMe has done very well. TNA is actually doing an auction on Whatnot. Whatnot is kind of like, I guess, a new eBay site. So they're going to be auctioning off stuff. All the talent from TNA has donated like different types of gear and memorabilia and all kinds of stuff for that auction. And I believe they're actually going to do like another fundraiser at one of their TV tapings. Pro Wrestling Tees has Chris Bay specific gear that you can buy, and all the proceeds are going to go to him. So the wrestling community has really rallied around him and they're really taking care of him. So I think that's really cool. I think everybody's doing a great job. I think TNA is doing a great job of taking care of them. It's really important to be able to do that. So get well, Chris Bay. We love you, buddy. I have had some interactions with him in the past and they've always been really positive. So God bless you, Chris. I hope you get back on your feet. If continuing to wrestle is exactly what you want, I would love to see that happen. But for me, I just hope you have a great life, a pain-free life, and I hope you're able to walk and just live happy and do all the things that are coming your way. Continue to make music, do everything that you want, man, because you deserve it. So